Let me welcome you all. I'm Alan Borsuk. I'm a senior fellow here at the law school. And as I bet you almost all know, in the middle here is Marty Schreiber. I will introduce him a little more in just a moment. And on the left end of the three of us is Dave Grams, the executive director of the Wisconsin chapter of the the American Alzheimer's Association. That's my first request, if you can silence your phones. When we do these programs, it's been a slow process of having people come back in person to programs. And this is also, I should add, being simulcast at the same time, and it will be posted on the law school website, so you can watch it remotely. Gradually, people have been coming back, and so we had about 100 people sign up for today, which usually means about 70 will show up. In this case, we had about 100 people sign up, and I bet we have 110 to 120 in the room here today, which is a statement about our two guests.
No, I think it's really the fact that people couldn't believe I would be invited back to the law school.
But it's also a statement about the subject, that this is something that is relevant to all of us of any age. For many of us, including myself, it's relevant to experiences we've had in our own lives, the episodes we've all faced with as we age, as our parents age, whatever. This is something that touches all of us and certainly interests all of us. So I appreciate your being here, and thank you for being here, especially in person. Marty Schreiber was the youngest person elected to the Wisconsin State Senate in, I believe it was 1962. I should add, he is a graduate of this year law school, although never really made a career of practicing law particularly.
Lack of clients.
Other career choices, as I would put it, which is to say he was in the legislature from a young age, comes from a political family. When I was a child reporter in the early 1970s, I covered Milwaukee City Hall, and I covered your father, who was an alderman at that time, representing the neighborhood that I live in to this day in Sherman Park. So Marty was elected in 1962. In 1970, he was elected lieutenant governor of Wisconsin. Again, very young age for that. And in 1977, when Pat Lucey, the then governor, was named ambassador to Mexico, Marty became the governor from 1977 to 1979. He has been engaged in public affairs and politics since then. He has had a very successful public affairs business, Martin Schreiber and Associates, I believe it's called now. All of which is to say, none of that really has much to do with why he's here today. As we will discuss, and as you know, his wife, Elaine, who I also knew a little bit from her work, especially at the Silver Spring Neighborhood Center, had Alzheimer's, very progressive, ultimately very severe. And Marty has written, it looks like he wrote 2 books. They're really 1 book, but I have both of them here because Harper just put out a edition recently, for a hardcover edition for national circulation, and there is a surge of interest in the book, My Two Elaines, Learning, Coping, and Surviving as an Alzheimer's Caregiver. Ralph Weber, who I see here, is a prominent local attorney and now consultant, and also involved in the education scene, which is where I know him from. Ralph got in touch with me several months ago and said, you should have Marty come in. And I thought, this is a really good subject. It's a powerful story and an important one with lessons for all of us. So this was a very easy sale, but I thank Ralph for being the one who got the ball rolling here. What we're going to do is talk for, well, maybe about half an hour with Marty about his experiences. And then we'll ask Dave, who has been with the Alzheimer's Association, I believe, since about 2015. And before that, for more than 20 years, worked for the American Cancer Society. So he has a lot of involvement in health advocacy groups of these kinds. Then we'll ask Dave for a little bit on the bigger picture of what's going on with Alzheimer's these days. So let me welcome both of you. And Governor Schreiber, let's talk about the first of the two Elaines first, how you met and your history as a couple. You met young.
Good. Well, thank you. First of all, he did that all without notes. He did the whole introductory scene without notes, and it's really a special privilege for me to be here. I did graduate from this law school in 1964. My responsibility was to make sure there was an upper half of a class, and I did that very well. It's just a special kind of experience to have the confidence from Ralph Weber along with your entire team to be able to be with you here. But my two Elaines, as Alan asked me, what about the first Elaine? Well, that was the girl that I met when I was 14 years of age in Latin class in high school. And I knew right away that she was the one for me. And we dated and we went steady. And we got engaged and we got married, and 4 children, 13 grandchildren, now 7 great-grandchildren. My advisor, my companion, everything you could ever want in a life's partner. And so if I would run for political office, she would be the hardest working campaigner. Most importantly, if I would lose, she would never let me feel defeated. And so that was the first Elaine. Well, the second Elaine began to appear some 22 years ago when she was about 63 years old. And she would get lost going to and from places she had been going to and from for the last 10 years. She would scrape the side of the car going in and out of the garage more times than I would have ever thought. And she was a great cook, and sometimes she would mess up her recipe so badly that she would cry. So that's the beginning of the second Elaine. And so it was a period then of first trying to understand what was happening, and then there was diagnosis, and then roughly for 12 years I tried to take care of Elaine at home and realized there are some good points and bad points about that and things I should have learned. And then after that 12 years, finally my health and Elaine's goodness could no longer tolerate me trying to continue taking care of her. So for the last then 8 years, she was at the Lutheran Home Assisted Living Memory Care, and she passed away on April 25th. And so this wonderful human being, as we had a wonderful life together, started to leave me. And by the time she passed away, there was nothing really that she could do to take care of herself in any kind of way. And I want you to know that even though there were those moments that I felt so sad about my loss, about the loss. So as I'm going through this experience and I'm watching Elaine disappear, and I saw what other caregivers were going through, it was at that point then I felt I just had to do something to share with other people so that they would not end up making the same mistakes that I made. And because of that, then I got involved in writing the book. One thing that I do, a couple points just that come really stand out in my mind. 20 years ago when Elaine was first diagnosed, Alzheimer's could not be cured, delayed, or prevented. Today, as we sit and talk, Alzheimer's cannot be cured, delayed, or prevented. But the point, there's a new drug out now that they talked about in the Wall Street Journal this morning. It still has some serious questions about it, but at least there's just a little bit of hope, but not a whole lot for this moment in time. But so I tried to do as much as I could to help Elaine through this period of time. And one day we were having lunch in the assisted living memory care, and while we're having lunch, she's beginning to cry. And I said, well, Elaine, why are you crying? Well, she says, I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. I didn't ask her what's wrong with her turkey husband. I didn't do that. But what that showed to me was that the person does not have to know your name in order for your hearts to touch. And if there's one thing that I would want to have every caregiver understand, and also every family of a caregiver, if they don't know your name, that's okay, because their mind is not working that way. What is the author once said, I may not remember what you said, but I'm going to remember how you made me feel. And so a lot of what Alzheimer's is about and caregiving is to help our loved one live their best life possible, but also helping the caregiver to live their best lives possible as well. For you're no good as a caregiver if you get yourself worn down and frazzled and beaten up and lack of sleep and lack of exercise and so on. So
well, let's talk about this. This book, I would suggest, is valuable and even moving reading for anyone, but it is especially addressed to people who have become involuntarily caregivers. In some points, you even discuss, in the second voice, you will find yourself, you're also very critical of yourself as a caregiver at times, not overall, but that there were things you did. You've got points in the book that are in separate boxes saying things I wish I'd known then, things I wish I'd done then. Well, let's start with that. What did you learn about being a caregiver?
Well, my conclusion, first of all, is, or maybe that's the beginning point, if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. And because I was ignorant of the disease, I didn't know what I could or should be doing to help my wife on this journey. I knew that it was a very terrible diagnosis to get. I knew that there was no cure, but beyond that, I really didn't have a sense. And when I say ignorance of the disease, I mean also by many people in the medical profession. Ignorance of the disease by churches and synagogues and parishes, because people really don't understand this disease, and because they don't understand it, we don't know how to react. Elaine, it didn't happen on a Thursday, it happened on a Friday. Don't put the keys in the dishwasher anymore. That's not it. The point of the matter is you try and join the world of the person who now is and understand if it happened on a Thursday, really happened on a Friday, that's all right. And that dishwasher, the keys for the dishwasher, that's okay too, but before you complain about that, check your own pockets, because sometimes they're in your own pocket before you see the keys disappear. But to understand this disease and to realize the importance of joining the world of this person who now is. Because as long as I try to hang on to the first Elaine, as I said, it didn't happen on a Thursday, it happened on a Friday, and wasn't the Joneses. Once I began to understand me joining her world, her anxiety, my anxiety, our lives became so much more relaxed and at ease. And I finally began to understand it's okay if we have to go for a 30-minute walk, we stand. And she said, look at the bird, that I stand and watch the bird with her.
You say that at the start, you were from the generation of men who weren't supposed to have feelings, who weren't, and especially weren't supposed to show them publicly, and that this is a direct quote, I was not man enough to know I needed help, you as a caregiver. If there's any theme that came through for me in this book, it was, as a caregiver, as a family member, get help, get allies. How did you learn that?
A couple different ways. It was sometimes very hard. We men don't like to ask for directions, that's for sure. And as long as I took this on as my personal battle against Alzheimer's, and I didn't focus on what was best for Elaine, there were all kinds of challenges. And we went through hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical tests and expenses to find out what was going wrong with me. Why should this ordinarily healthy person...
Going wrong with you, not just her,
me,
just to make that clear.
Yeah, okay. Why should this healthy guy all of a sudden be having all kinds of medical issues and so forth? And we didn't really examine it. Was the anxiety and the tension? And I'm getting off a little bit of what we were talking about, but one thing I realized is that that caregivers go through what I would call an unanticipated, unacknowledged grieving. For example, I had a friend who retired and had dinner one night and died of a heart attack. That was tragic. Well, there was a funeral, and people came to express their sympathy and shared that experience of passing, and there was closure. A caregiver never really gets closure. And so, but you do see your loved one passing away all of the time. And so as a caregiver, we have to understand the reality of the situation. If Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. What is one of the realities? Your loved one is not going to come back into your world, no matter what you do. Another reality is that your loved one depends on you so much, like a lifeline, and if you don't take care of yourself, that lifeline becomes frayed if you get overworked, if you don't get enough sleep, if you don't get the right kind of diet, and if you get involved in a Beefeater's martini 2 or 3 or 4 every evening, that's not going to help you do the kind of thing that you want to do in taking care of your loved one.
In fact, you describe in the book that there was a period of, I believe it was several years, in which you were sleeping on the couch near the front door to make sure that she didn't walk out in the middle of the night. And the upshot of that, in part, was you weren't getting enough quality sleep.
Not only not enough quality sleep, but of course that wears on you. And I talk a little bit in the book about how if you have a lot of anxiety, there's cortisol. And nursing students will know more about that than I do, but cortisol is a chemical that's released before the adrenaline. If you have too much cortisol, you gain weight, but it also causes all kinds of other factors, even maybe dementia in certain circumstances. So there's just so much lack of understanding about the importance that caregivers must take care of themselves in order for them to take care of their loved ones. So in the subtitle of the book is Learning, Coping, and Surviving as an Alzheimer's caregiver. But in talking, there's also a word we could add in that is thriving. And there is only one way, I think, that you can thrive as a caregiver, and that is to make sure that you take care of yourself, keep yourself healthy, and realize how important of a lifeline you are to the person who is ill.
And even, I mentioned this, you referred to it, but you refer to that you got into a period where you were using what you refer to as the caregiver's poison. I mean, just drinking too much as a stress relief thing. This wasn't good.
Well, what happens is, and many caregivers who go through this experience, the frustration is there's nothing you can do about it. And so what happens also, because this disease is regressive in its nature, I finally think I have how I can take care of Elaine, how I can keep her busy, how she can feel relaxed. And what happens is the next day, we're down a couple notches from the standpoint of where she was before. And because of that, it's a new day. Now what do I do? And then now it's the continuous questions that I thought I had resolved in answering yesterday and so forth. And so the caregiver always is trying to play catch up. And we have to understand we can never catch up. That's not the goal. The goal is to help our loved one live their best life possible. But as long as we're trying to play catch up, and so what happens, because you're trying to play catch up, you don't sleep as well. You don't spend as much time with friends. You don't get the exercise. You don't take the time off for respite care. And down you go.
And in fact, you, as I think is common, went through some periods of denial that things were getting worse. You also thought things were going to get better. And you very bluntly say in the book to people who are in similar situations, don't think it's going to get better. You got to cope with it the way it is.
There's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. It's just not understanding what this disease holds in the forecast. And if I can get away from fighting this disease personally, and I can get the focus on what really should be happening, and that is my goal should be to help my loved one live their best life possible, and also try and make sure that I live my best life possible. And that's not selfish. It's being the kind of loving, caring person to my wife that I should be, because I'm no use to her if I am not taking care of myself.
You did learn two things. One is to get help, largely through the auspices of the Alzheimer's Association. Also, that you put her into programs, first day programs, and we'll get then to the decision to put her into a full-time care situation. In fact, she was in the day program that my father was in at the Jewish home, the day program there. Not the only excellent program in town, but one of them. And my father was there. I don't think they overlap, but they might have. How did that help to have, something like a day program that you could that she could spend her time there?
Yes. A caregiver has to be sort of like a detective, and in being like a detective, you have to try and find out what is going to catch the attention and focus of your loved one. I needed respite care, I knew that, and I tried to have people come in. Elaine said, I'm not having any point of any woman or any person coming into my home. Well, I said, try daycare. No, I'm not going to do that. Well, wait a minute, she enjoyed college. So I said, Elaine, what about if we go to continuing education? And I want to talk about, make sure that we get involved in talking about fibbing, therapeutic fibbing. But anyway, so what happened was then, yes, she said, I think I would like to go to school. So I got a spiral notebook, and I got a ballpoint pen. I talked to the people at the Jewish home in advance, and I said, I'm bringing in a new student, quote, quote, and unquote. And so Elaine went in, and she kept her notes, and at the end of the day, we reviewed the notes. She was feeling worthwhile. I had some respite, and it was quite a comfortable feeling knowing then that she was at peace. But so I had, maybe call it trickery, I don't know. So I got her into into daycare. But also one thing we have to understand is because they make up their mind, and you can't fight this disease. So some mornings, one morning I drove up, I said, I'm not going in. Wild horses could not drag Elaine out of that car. I said, okay. So we drove around and looked at the lakefront and came back. Here we are, okay. Can I go into 2 points just quick? Please. Therapeutic fibbing and also redirection. So Elaine asked me once, how are my parents? And I said, Elaine, your parents are both dead. Well, the shock on her face when she realized she didn't say goodbye, much less attend the funeral. I said, I'm never going to put her through that again. Then she asked me, how are my parents a little bit later? I said, Elaine, they're doing well. I said, your mom likes going to do her church work. Your dad likes the sports. And, Elaine said, that makes me feel so good. Well, that's therapeutic fibbing. Therapeutic fibbing. 2 points on that. Number one, I tried it the first year of marriage, and it doesn't work very well. The second point on the therapeutic fibbing, Moses went up to Mount Sinai twice to get the 10 Commandments down. And I checked this out personally myself. I checked each of those tablets that he brought down. There's a footnote where God says therapeutic fibbing is okay and even good. So you can feel comfortable about that. Now let's talk about redirection, the fact that when I drive up and Elaine says, I'm not going in, period. Okay, 9:30 in the morning. Elaine wants a glass of wine. No, you can't have, that's not the answer. Elaine, do you want red wine or white wine? Do you want it in a taller glass or in a smaller glass? Do you want to drink it with your neighbors and so forth? By redirection, we're not confronting the fact that you can't have a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning. So then we get to the next point. Maybe redirection doesn't work. The next question, what is wrong with someone having a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning if they don't know it's morning, noon, or night anyway? And so, again, it's joining the world of the person who now is. And by joining their world, our world is going to be a lot better, and we don't just so much have to fight this disease. We can't win this disease against Alzheimer's. We can set our goal to help our loved one live their best possible life.
Another quote from the book, I should have let go of my first Elaine sooner, and so that you could love the second Elaine more.
We call that the pivot. There's two pivots. The one pivot is by the loved one, and that's when Elaine completely passed out of her understanding of who she was. In other words, she's now this different person, and she's not trying to herself hang on to what she once had in her life. By the grace of God, that pivot happens for the person with Alzheimer's. So they really don't know what was. The other pivot is what the caregiver has to make, and that is to let go again of this person who once was, so you can embrace this person who now is. And it doesn't happen like, any great basketball player would reverse from one way to another. It happens in degrees, and sometimes you have to go back a little bit, but finally you make the pivot and say, okay, this is now my loved one, and this is now the person that I can try and help live their best life possible. Because again, as long as I tried to drag her and keep her in my world, it was selfish on my part and stupid, ignorant.
And the point came where the right thing to do, in fact, the only thing to do, it seemed, was to put her into a residential care situation at the Lutheran home at 76th and North. I drive by it all the time. How did you handle that?
This is where the Alzheimer's Association comes in, and my thanks to you and your team. I went, we had these health issues. We had the beef-eaters, gin, and so forth. And so now my children had 4 children, adults. They really had like an intervention with me and say, Dad, you're going to be dead before Mom if you don't do something to take care of yourself. Why do we want to lose 2 parents? And again, the toughest job, the toughest decision of any caregiver is making the decision for your loved one to go into assisted living memory care. So I'm meeting with the counselor on a monthly, regular basis, and very helpful. And so I talked to the counselor. I said, I cannot see putting Elaine into a nursing home. Well, she said, you're not putting Elaine anyplace. She said, what you are doing is giving her a chance to be who she is now. Can Marty Schreiber's 24/7 nursing home care take care of her? Well, the answer was no. I was getting frustrated. I was getting irritable. I had health issues, and it was getting worse because I was getting more frustrated. So Marty Schreiber's 24/7 nursing home couldn't take care of her. And so at that point then, I realized that in my selfishness, I was the one who wanted to beat Alzheimer's. I didn't think about what is best for my wife, Elaine. I just was the one to make the determination to fight this disease. So I can remember, and I'll just take a moment to tell you that the day that I took her to assisted living memory care, it was the day after Labor Day. I had made arrangements with the people over at the Lutheran home with a great team there. I had already put some of Elaine's pictures and favorite pieces of furniture there. So we're leaving our home, and I walk out first, and as I walk out, she follows me and she leaves the door open. And I couldn't ask her to close the door, because I knew that was the last of our life together at that moment in time. And so I took her to the Lutheran home, and I dropped her off, and horrible feeling. So then I walk out into the parking lot, a beautiful day, I remember that. And I had on a blue shirt, and Elaine had gone to daycare there before. So it was a transition just from the same building from the daily classroom into full-time assisted living. So what I did, I walked out, and one of Elaine's classmates was there, a young gentleman who had early onset. And he looked at me. Oh, he said, that's a beautiful shirt. Can I have that shirt? Well, I had another shirt in the car, and it seemed to make him sort of feel good, I thought. So I said, well, come on over. So what I did was I walked over to my car, and I took off my shirt, and I gave it to him. He says, that's a beautiful blue shirt. He said, that is just such a wonderful blue shirt. Thank you so much for that. And well, I put on my other shirt. Now, there are some people who think that I'm really a good person for giving him the shirt off my back. But I had just held up a quick trip store, and police were looking for a short, fat fellow with the blue shirt, and here this taller fellow with a mustache was not wearing the blue shirt. But anyway, I made that last part up.
I'm guessing that's true, yes.
The shirt happened, but not the quick trip.
And everyone, I think, should be aware that in no way did you abandon her. You went there every day.
Yeah.
You had dinner there, if not all 3 meals, which was not a short trip from, you live in Bayview, I know, but you were there a lot.
10.3 miles one way. But
who's counting?
But see, my 2 Elaines, we can still have a life. Again, if we are smart enough to look for it. If I would have gotten smart enough sooner to know that this is the new Elaine, and God love her, she's just so terrific in where she is and what she is, and that's okay. Plus, the wonderful people who give the care and assistance. Plus, you meet other caregivers, and you learn you're not alone. And so, people say, you're so wonderful as a caregiver, and you're wonderful for doing this or that. If I have a double hot fudge turtle sundae from Culver's or from wherever, and you give me credit for that, don't give me credit for that, because that's something I really want to do. If I lose 10 pounds, then you say, well, I give you a lot. I'll accept the credit for that. But the fact of the matter, it is something that I wanted to do. It's something that was an enrichment to my life. And in a way, I had a chance to love 2 people with all of my heart. And maybe a lot of us don't get that opportunity. And for me, that was a special thing.
To me, if there's a single message in the book to caregivers or family members, oftentimes both, it's get help and take care of yourself. And a big ally for you in doing that was the Alzheimer's Association and people there, which is the segue to bringing Dave Grams into the discussion, with 3 questions for you. I should add, you are not a medical person, but nonetheless, you're pretty knowledgeable on the subject. My first question is, what is Alzheimer's? I think a lot of people say anyone whose memory is slipping, or they're getting Alzheimer-y. But it is a specific disease.
Sure, it's a progressive disease that affects the nerve cells in the brain and the connections between those cells, and ultimately creates the loss of memory, the confusion, continues to progress all the way through what would be, unfortunately, the cellular death that occurs, and the reduced cognition, and even in the very latest stages, of advanced Alzheimer's disease, body function that begins to decline and shut down. And so it's what I would say is, intellectually we can understand that, but as Marty has indicated, it's more than just normal memory loss. As we age, our memories aren't quite as sharp as they were when we were much younger. And when things start to happen where recipes that a person has known for years and years, different ingredients start to show up in that, or when Marty use the example of can't find the car keys. I can never find my car keys either, right? But I'm not putting the car keys in the dishwasher or the refrigerator, or it's going to the market and not understanding how to get yourself back. We see, unfortunately, the silver alerts that are out there, right? People go to familiar places, they aren't able to make their way back. That's getting in the way of normal everyday life. And now that's the differentiation between I walked into this room and I forgot what I came here for, and this is something much more serious that honestly needs to be addressed with the physician.
Medically speaking, or in terms of research, is there progress being made? I mean, Alzheimer's has been the big issue now for, 3 decades or so. Are we any closer to a treatment for it?
Well, as Marty referenced, literally in the last 24 hours, there has been news of potential new treatment that's available. What I would describe this moment in time as, from an association perspective, would be hopeful and cautiously optimistic. This is the first time in history that a treatment that actually treats the underlying biology of the disease is becoming available, meaning it can slow the progression of the disease. What was announced yesterday at a conference has shown the ability to slow the progression of the disease by nearly 30%. And when you think about that over months or years, that's more quality time for people to be able to have with their families and just the ability to stay independent. But compared to other conditions, we're at the very early stages. And what I mean by that is this is, again, the first time in history where something like this could be available. FDA still needs to rule on it and review it. But when you consider other types of medical conditions, there are clear treatments and clear protocols for how to handle it. This, for Alzheimer's disease, is the first time that it's occurring. So this is a watershed moment in this cause.
And my third question, from the standpoint of caregivers and families, how are things doing? Are the systems in place better now than they were a few years ago? And what is in place? If Marty's message is get help, what is that? What's available, and what does that mean?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, the Alzheimer's Association, we have resources available 24/7 by 365. We have a helpline, because when you're caring for a loved one who's living with the disease, it doesn't always fit perfectly between 8 and 5, a situation that might come up that you need assistance with. Well, we have staff here locally who can support people and have individual family meetings to talk about what's occurring with their loved one. That helpline is a lifeline many times for people who are just uncertain of how to handle a situation that's occurring or what they're seeing. They want verification of what they're seeing in a loved one. And so what I would say in general, there are a lot of great people and organizations in the community that are really trying to help support Alzheimer's caregivers. The association is not the only group, but we are certainly ready, again, on an ongoing basis to support caregivers. And it's really the heart of who we are. It's how we started. While we fund research across the country, across the globe, frankly, we work with our elected officials to ensure that Alzheimer's and all forms of dementia are given the priority that they need to be by public health priorities. We're doing education because, as Marty mentioned, not knowing about the disease and what to look for and really understand it, we feel that we're breaking down stigma associated with dementia by educating people about what it's all about, what it is and isn't, as we've talked about. But again, it's one of those scenarios where we're ready to funnel people in the right direction, whether it's services we provide or other really good organizations in the community.
My assumption is that that period of denial, when both by the person and by the family, is really pretty common. And that period of where you say, well, we can cope with this at home, is also pretty common. What's your advice to people on issues like that, or development, things that are developing like that?
What I would say is immediately upon any concern that you have with a loved one or someone who may be living with the disease themselves, reach out and again, number one, talk with your healthcare provider. Number two, get help immediately, because again, the progression of the disease is one where the more you know and the better strategies you have in place to be able to really provide that best possible care is going to reduce your own caregiver stress. That's what Marty describes here today and in the book is a master class on how what we're trying to do for people to help with coping strategies and ensure that again, that stress that comes with the caregiving does not become overwhelming. Don't wait for something to quote break, right? Within the system you have in place. Get help as soon as possible.
Is the available help in line with the actual need? Talking like, say, a broad subject, the whole Milwaukee area or Wisconsin or the nation.
Well, I think without question, the more people know about us or other good organizations who are providing this care and support, this help, we're surprised almost on a daily basis how people haven't heard of the Alzheimer's Association, or that there's an organization there to be able to help people once there's been a diagnosis, those kinds of things. So spreading that word in the community and encouraging people to reach out for help is a huge part of what we are looking to accomplish on a daily basis. What I'll say is there's more than 6.5 million people living with Alzheimer's today across the country. And when you think about what it means to potentially have that treatment available and to seek care and support, if there was a greater percentage of folks who came and sought those services, it's going to put stress on the healthcare system, and we need to be ready for it. But people need to be aware that, again, on a daily basis, there are organizations who are ready to help and support folks who are going through this journey.
Elaine died in April, 8 months ago, coming up on 8 months ago. And you've been renewing your efforts to spread the messages that you have, including there was a segment recently on the Today Show with you. We met a couple weeks ago, and you were on your way to Eau Claire, La Crosse.
Yep.
You're on the move, which is good. What's motivating you to keep doing this?
Elaine probably is one of the main motivators, and at the assisted living memory care where Elaine is, they call it Elaine's Hope. That's the name of the facility, and Elaine's Hope is that a person who is ill and the caregiver can live their best lives possible. And so what it motivates me also is knowing what I went through and how maybe had I been smarter, I could have given Elaine a better life, and I myself could have had a better life. I have seen the degree of stress that comes about when people don't understand this disease and they argue with their loved one about whether it should be their glass of water or someone else's glass of water, and it just... And then another thing that motivates me is to have people come up after we have given a talk. So, and people understand they're not the only ones that got angry and frustrated. They're not the only ones who feel deserted. They're not the only ones who are feeling so distressed. And and they're not the only ones who feel guilty, and that we shouldn't be feeling guilty. And it's just, it's as I begin in the book, it's like, I know that there are going to be people as caregivers who are going to come along and have to go on this journey. And it's like, I've done it, and I'm sitting on the side of the trail, and I'm saying to anyone who's going on that journey, sit down and talk with me just for a few minutes. Just hear what I have to talk about relative to Alzheimer's and how you have to join their world, and just understand it, because I think it's going to make the journey, although arduous, it's going to make it easier. So that's, and also, just, could you think of a better group of people to be with here than here at Marquette? That's also a very important factor, just to just to be with people and to share.
I am eager to give people in the audience a chance to ask questions. Well, certainly we give Ralph Weber the first choice.
Thanks. Well, two things. Marty.
Well, hold on a second. We're going to pass around a microphone.
First of all, on behalf of everybody here and everybody who's read your book and seen you on the Today Show and all the different places, thank you. We'll remember both what you said and how you made us feel. So thank you very much for sharing your insights and your wisdom. Secondly, you are on this mission to defeat ignorance of Alzheimer's, to help caregivers. You're putting yourself out there. There's a lot of people in this room with a lot of connections. If somebody wants to have you speak in front of another large group, how do they go about doing that?
If someone wants to hear me speak before another large group, how do you go about getting at that? Well, 414-405-1045 is my phone number. Well, thank you for that. And it is a mission. And so the fact that there are the number of people here is very rewarding, and it would be my hope that once all is said and done as it relates to this get-together, you feel it was time well spent. We do have a website, my2elaines.com, all one word. That'll sort of keep you up to date on some of the things that we're about. Certainly we have books here for you to buy. The difference between the two
Out in the hall afterwards, and he will autograph them.
So the difference between the two books, as you can see, this one here, this is what was self-published. This one is we call the paperback, and this one is by Harper Magazine. The difference between the two is larger print pictures, no larger print, no pictures, but a longer discussion with a neuropsychologist backing up the discussions that I have on what I wish I would have done. So the same information in both books, but a neuropsychologist backs up more on what we did on a medical basis. And for example, hypothetically, if I say that drinking bleach will take care of COVID, well, you should get some
Nobody
kind of
would say that.
No, well, I mean, that you should get it backed up with the medical doctor. That's what I'm saying. So that's
okay.
what we wanted. That's what we wanted to do here. And then also, this. How much time do we have?
Well, I do want to give people a chance to ask questions.
All right, I'm going to stop here.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Hold on a second. Eric will bring you a microphone.
At the time that my father had dementia, they weren't diagnosing Alzheimer's. It was very difficult to diagnose. So I'm wondering about that, how difficult it is. And then for those of us who begin to see changes in our loved ones, people who could always had a sense of direction, could drive right to a place, and then are making wrong turns or sort of just not quite, they eventually get there, but getting lost without, they sort of know where they are, but they can't quite get to where they want to be. They're having some trouble coming up with words at times, symptoms like that. What are some of the things we should be aware of as we, are with our aging loved ones?
I'll give Dave first crack at that.
Sure. Well, it's you're being tuned into some of those things is a huge first step to be aware and what to look for. Again, we always try to tell people, if you have concerns about the memory or cognition of a loved one, to start with your healthcare provider. There are some initial screening tests that can be made available, and they will know what next steps may need to be taken to really try to pinpoint a diagnosis. So that's always the first place to start. Well, I know there are reliable screening tests and other tests that are available, and they have been reliable in determining that someone is either in a stage of mild cognitive impairment or even mild Alzheimer's disease. I would say it's never easy, right? Because it's not as simple as, well, here's a blood test and it indicates X. That's just not going to happen. But the screening test and the cognition testing has been used for many, many years, and really, I believe, is seen as reliable.
Carl Hertz.
Marty, you tell very well there's things that led up to you making a decision to put your wife in care. But was there a moment, was there some point at which you said, this is it, I've got to do it? I understand the buildup. I'm just wondering, what is it that pushes you over the edge?
The question is, what is it
Keep the microphone here.
that pushes you over the edge as far as making the determination for your loved one to go into assisted living? I wish it would have been a eureka kind of moment, where there's a handwriting on the wall, and this is the moment in time. It sort of builds up, and finally you realize that the life and safety of your loved one, or the life and safety of you, the caregiver, are at risk, are being threatened. At that point, then, you just become so exasperated and so unable to cope. And again, as it builds up, it doesn't happen with a snap of a finger. But any of you that are thinking about the need for assisted living and so forth, I know it's a tough decision, but you have to look at it, and understand that, as my counselor said, helping my loved one live her best life possible. And so that what took a while to get into my brain, because, as I said, I'm fighting this thing personally with Alzheimer's. That's my battle, not thinking about Elaine. So get that personal battle out of my head, and the question, what is best for my loved one?
Judge Clifford.
This is for either of you. Can you discuss grappling with anticipatory grief?
Ooh, okay.
Well, I'll start.
Sure. Tough question.
I don't know exactly how to grapple with anticipatory grief, other than to acknowledge it, to understand that you're losing your loved one. And we don't think about it as grieving, because we're so busy thinking about taking care of our loved one. And so to understand that it's there and to recognize it, because, as I said, I think it's unacknowledged, unanticipated, and I think by acknowledging it, I think we can find it easier to cry and get those emotions out, easier to share these emotions with our loved ones as we care for the person who is ill.
I would only add that knowing the progression of the disease and knowing what comes next, and as best as possible trying to take control of meaning, I know what I'd like to do next. I have a plan for how to progress through this. I think that at times can be helpful with it. But again, it's one of those scenarios where I would agree with Marty that acknowledging it and trying to know that you're doing the best for your loved one is something that would hopefully provide some relief for that grief.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So my grandfather, many years ago at this point, passed from a genetic disease that's very aggressive and has symptoms that are very similar to Alzheimer's. And with the exception of the last few months of his life where he needed more intense care, my grandmother was his full-time caregiver, and she found that very socially isolating, partially just because of the amount of work that she had to take on, but also because a lot of my grandfather's symptoms were very unsettling for people that she knew. And so one of the things that we had talked about later on in her life, that she just felt very isolated from her previous life, from her previous community. So I'm just wondering, A, if you experienced that, but also sort of how you battled against those feelings of social isolation as a caregiver.
That's a very important question. What about social isolation? I call this disease not a chicken casserole disease. If I fall and break my hip, neighbors will bring me a chicken casserole. If I have open heart surgery and I'm recuperating, they'll bring me a chicken casserole. My wife has Alzheimer's. If Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. My friends, my neighbors, my relatives, many of them, are ignorant of Alzheimer's. And because they are ignorant of Alzheimer's, they stay away. And friends are wonderful, who were wonderful and are still wonderful after 34 years, 30 or 40 years of being together. Now, because my wife has Alzheimer's, they don't know what to do. And now I'm battling this with Elaine. I'm trying to do my best there, and now all of a sudden, my friends are ignoring me, you know. And in the book, I talk about it as being the lone wolf being kicked out of the pack. And so how do you deal with the social isolation is not being hesitant to share this with your friends and your neighbors, to actually say, you know, this is tough, I need your help. It makes the disease even tougher to care for. And for those of you that are caregivers, I know that what you will tell your friends are that you can't describe what it is unless you live it. And your grandmother probably would be right here telling us that. And once you live it, you just got to figure out how can we help other people live it better.
But if I can add, in the book you say we should have been more honest with our friends earlier on. Mm-hmm. We should have been more candid about what was going on, and maybe they would have responded more helpfully if they understood the picture.
We tried to hide it, you know, it just because you didn't want people to start staying away, and you wanted to protect Elaine. I didn't want people to think that she, you know, just not right and so forth. So,
last question. Yeah, right here.
Okay.
Wait. We're coming with a microphone. Okay, good.
I was wondering, does the disease itself cause sleep issues for the patient?
Does it cause what?
Sleep issues for the patient.
The question is, does it cause sleep issues for the patient? I think it depends on the patient. Elaine never had sleep issues, okay? But I do believe that it could cause sleep issues. It can. They say that there's one thing about one case of Alzheimer's. It's just one case of Alzheimer's. You could have 100 cases, and they all could be different in one significant form. I want to mention one thing when we talk about diagnosis and what you should do. So I get this question a lot. What is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? A very important question and a very important answer. Dementia is like the umbrella. Cancer, okay, lung cancer, skin cancer, heart, all kinds of cancers, okay? Dementia means the brain is not working right. Why is the brain not working right? Well, maybe because of depression. maybe because of a mix-up in medications, maybe because of an operable brain tumor, maybe because of Alzheimer's, maybe because of Lewy bodies, maybe because of Parkinson's. But it is so important to know that if the brain is not working right, that does not necessarily mean that it's Alzheimer's. It could be simply the fact that there's an infection that is sort of messing up the thought process. So as Dave said, you've got to get that diagnosis, and you want to make sure that it's an accurate one. You've got to make that planning. I mean, gosh, you think it's one thing to deal with your loved one. It's another thing to think about, well, what about finances? What about attorney for health care? What about, who are we going to get for this and who are we going to... So there's a lot of mechanical things that have to be dealt with. And it's very difficult to do it, but once you get it done, it sure is a relief.
Dave, concluding thoughts here from you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, first and foremost. As you have heard, there's a lot to what it takes to really understand and provide wonderful care for someone living with Alzheimer's, and to understand what's available to help and provide support. Again, I think it's one of those cases where if you have any questions about what you might be seeing or experiencing yourself with regard to memory and cognition, please reach out as quickly as possible and try to get to the bottom of what it's all about. And again, there's great organizations that are available to be able to support you along that way. And it's something that can be very isolating, and ensuring that you don't stay as isolated as what may be possible is, I think, the big takeaway is the more you know, the more you can provide that kind of, again, great care and or understand what might be happening with a loved one.
Concluding thought from you, Marty?
I think if you can understand that you've got to learn about this disease, and it's not a battle of you personally with the disease, it's a matter of helping your loved one live their best life possible, a matter of making sure you join their world, a matter of making sure that you as a caregiver understand how important you are. Before we went to print, I found these series of notes and journals that Elaine had been keeping since her diagnosis. And we went through them, and each chapter begins with one of Elaine's notes that my daughters, Christine and I, sort of picked out. I want you to know that when I read those notes, you should know that we prayed together and we cried together, but never did I understand how much she depended upon me to take care of myself so I could take care of her. I never really fully understood and realized that. And so, yes, we caregivers have a challenge and a journey that, but we can make it easier just simply by even taking care of ourselves, because that's going to give us greater ability to help us survive and maybe thrive, but also help our loved one. So those would be my concluding thought.
Let me add a couple things. One that was not part of the plan here. The woman who passed out, you're all facing this way. You may not realize that we had a visit during the program from 4 members of the Milwaukee Fire Department, and that she was given good assistance. Great thanks to them, and great thanks to the law school team here, Hillary DuBois and Jenny Chick and Jordan LaFontaine, who raised the alarm and got help. So I believe she is doing okay. Second is great thanks to all of you for being here. I suspect every one of us has a connection to this subject that is both personal and probably intense. There are about 10 times I wanted to interrupt Marty and say, well, with my dad, and I bet you all had the same feelings. And that's because it touches so many of us, and that we need to learn from each other, support each other, use the networks we have around us. The biggest takeaway I have from the book is that get help, get networking, take care of yourself if you're in a caregiver situation or a family member is having Alzheimer's or similar issues. At the end of the book, Marty is very self-critical in the course of the book because there's lots he did wrong by his own description. But at the end of the book, he says, I'd like to think I've done all right, and I accept the fact that I'm a work in progress. Well, we are all a work in progress when it comes to this. The whole subject of Alzheimer's is a work in progress. But I think we can all say to Dave Grams and the people from the Alzheimer's Association, you've done all right. And we can especially say to Marty Schreiber, Governor Schreiber, I should be more respectful, but you're kind of a Marty person, you know, that you've done all right. And not only did you do all right for Elaine, the first Elaine, the second Elaine, you've done great public service by spreading the thoughts and the messages that you are and reaching out and helping people. As we mentioned before, there are books, both the paperback version and the hardcover version, out in the hallway here. We're not exactly selling books, but I want you to be aware of that. Great thanks to all of you for being here, and especially great thanks to Dave Grams and Governor Marty Schreiber for leading us on this conversation on such an important and personal subject.